everyone. So today my topic is hello everyone. This is Pooja Sharma and I have been explaining about the introduction of loops. So this topic is basically a part of programming for problem solving, and it comes under unit 3. So prior to this, we have already studied about operators and types of operators, the basic structure of C programming, and next we have come to loops. So why we study loops? What is the basic requirement of studying loops? So prior to this, we have already studied about what we already know that basically in C programming we have already studied the basic structure of C programming. We have already discussed about all the problems we are discussing. We have already discussed about the sequential programming, like all the problems like we have already discussed area of circle, and all such problems. All these problems came under the sequential programming. And after that, we were talking about conditional statements like if else. Suppose if the condition is true, then we have to move towards these statements, and if the condition is false, then we have to evaluate the other statements. So this comes under the if and else conditions. So after that, if the requirement is that we need to repeat few instructions, if we need to few instruction about n number of times, so definitely this is not a feasible solution to write those instructions n number of times. Instead, we can apply loops. So loops in programming is basically it come into use when we need to repeatedly execute a block of statements. Example is suppose if we want to print hello world around 10 times or 20 times, then instead of every time writing printf hello world 10 times or 100 times, we can use loops. So the alternative solution to this problem, to write hello world around 10 times or around 100 times, the alternative solution for this problem is loops. So in loops, the statement needs to be written only once and the loop will be executed around 10 times. So what is actually loop? Loop is basically a sequence of instructions and it is repeated until a certain condition is reached. If the condition is reached, then definitely we will come out of the loop. Let us say we have to print around n number of times. Suppose n number of times hello world. Suppose if we have printed hello world once, then second, then third, then fourth, then fifth, then sixth, then 10th. Then the moment the loop counter comes to I equals to 1, I equals to 11, then the moment loop counter is reached to the moment the loop counter exceeds the value, exceeds the condition, then the loop will automatically exit. So basically loop executes the sequence of statements many times until the condition is false. We can say the loop consists of basically two parts, the body of loop and the control statement. So this is actually the body of the loop, and here we apply the control statement, the condition. So control statement, what is control statement? It is actually a combination of some conditions that direct the body of the loop to execute until a specified condition became false. So purpose of the loop is to repeat the same code n number of times. So there are basically two types of loop. First of all, we come under the entry control loop, or you can say the pre-checking. We also call it as pre-checking loop. Pre-checking loop. And next is the exit control loop. We can call it as post-checking loop. We have already mentioned it here, pre-checking and the post-checking loop. So what is entry control and what is exit control loops? In entry control loops, the test condition is tested before entering the loop. It is also known as pre-checking loop. Examples are for loop and while loop. What does it actually means? Before entering inside the loop, one second. So basically before entering inside the loop, it checks the condition. If the condition is true, then it executes all the statements inside the loop and it increases the counter value. And if the very next time, in the very next iteration, it again checks the condition, and if the condition becomes true, it keeps on evaluating the statements. So basically in each and every loop, we have 4 steps. If we say the initialization, in each and every type of loop, we have initialization, we have condition checking, after that the statements, the updation. So initially, what initialization is? Basically, there is a counter variable. So initially, the counter variable is 1. So we initialize the value. If we have to print hello world around 10 times, so first of all, the counter variable would be 1. After that, every time it checks the condition. So here in condition, we need to apply if until I is less than equals to 10. So this is the condition. If the condition is true, then only the next statements would be executed, and if the condition is false, the statements would not be executed anyhow. After that, the updation of the counter variable. So the very next time the I would become plus plus. So here the counter variable would be updated. So in entry control loop, what we are doing is pre-checking. Before entering the loop, first of all the condition is checked, and after that the statements would be executed and the counter variable would be updated. But what comes under the exit control loop? In exit control loop, first of all the statements would be executed. In the very first step, the statements would be executed, and then the condition would be checked, and after that the entire process would be continued. So we can say in exit control loop, in these types of loop, the test condition is tested or evaluated at the end of the loop body, and therefore the loop body will execute at least once. Irrespective of whether the test condition is true or false, it hardly matters. But first of all, at least we can say the exit control loop, then the statements are executed at least once. So anyhow, even if the condition is false, the compiler control would enter into the loop at least once. So therefore, the loop body will execute at least once, and irrespective of whether the test condition is true or false. This is also known as post-checking loop. Why we call it as post-checking loop? Because first of all, the statement, the very first time, at the very first iteration, the statements would be executed, and in the end, the condition would be checked. Always remember, in entry control loop, there are various examples like for loop and the while loop. In for loop, when we write the for loop and when we write the while loop, in for loop and while loop, we do not use the semicolon. But in do while loop, we always use the semicolon statement. This is the basic difference of entry control and exit control loop. Let us move to the next point. Yes. So here it is this is the diagrammatic representation. The syntax of entry control and exit control loops are here. So for loop, we can say, I have already discussed, in all the types of loop we have around 4 steps. First of all, the initialization. Second is the condition. Third is the updation. If the condition is true, then only the statements would be executed. And for the next iteration, the counter variable would be updated. So this is the syntax of the for loop. In for loop, if we say this is the syntax in for loop, the syntax says we have to use the keyword for. Here the initialization, let us say the counter variable is 1, we have initialized the value of I, and the condition until the I becomes 10, the loop will be continued, and then the updation I plus plus. And here are the statements, whatever the statements we want to evaluate, whatever the expressions we want to evaluate. So in this loop, the first step says, firstly that this would be evaluated. First, the counter variable I would be equal to 1. After that, condition would be checked. If 1 is less than equals to true, 10, the compiler says yes, this condition is true. If the condition is true, then only the compiler's control would enter inside the body of the loop. So this is the body of the loop. All the statements would be executed, and once the compiler's control reach to the semicolon, the end of the body of the loop, then this is the third step. Then the counter variable would be increased. So the I value would become 2. I plus plus means the value of I would become I is equals to I plus 1. When the counter variable would be increased, then again the condition would be checked. If 2 is less than, means I is less than equals to 10, mane 2 is less than equals to 10. Yes, this is the condition is true. The compiler says the condition is true. Then again, if the condition is true, the compiler's control would enter inside the body of the loop. So this is how the for loop is used. So we can say at the very initial point, the prior to entering the loop, the condition is being checked. So we can say this is the entry control, or we can also call it as a pre-checking loop. So prior to entering inside the loop, the condition is checked here. If the condition is true, then only the statements would be executed, and if the condition is false, then automatically the compiler's control would come outside the loop. Similarly, we have a very different syntax of, let me just erase everything over here. Yes. Similarly, the while loop. See, while loop and for loop, these are quite similar. Only the syntax is different. In while loop, here we have initialization inside the for loop, but in while loop, the initialization is outside the for loop. Initially, we have to initialize the counter variable. Then we have a keyword while. Here the condition would be entered, I is less than equals to n or 10, any interval you want to enter. Then you write all the statements. Let us say we need to write hello world, right? And then the counter variable would be increased. This is how things would be evaluated. Now let us see. So how this would be executed. First of all, the first step says I equals to 1. So you'll update the I value here. The value of I is 1. Then the condition would be checked. If I is 1 is less than equals to 10, the compiler says yes, the condition is true. This is the relational operator. Always remember, this is a relational operator. We have already discussed in operators, right? If the condition is true, then only the compiler's control will enter inside the loop. Then it will printf hello world. It will print HW, and the counter variable I would be increased. I plus plus means the value of I would increment by 1. The I will become 2. Then again, since this is a while loop, again the compiler's control would move back to here. And again, it will check the condition. If 2 is less than equals to 10, here it is already written I is less than equals to 10, and the updated value of I is 2 if the condition is checked, if 2 is less than equals to 10. Yes, the compiler says the condition is true, then again it will enter inside the loop. So all this entire loop would be executed until the value of I is 10. At the very end, last time, when the I becomes 11, let us say if the I becomes 11, then it again check if 11 is less than equals to 10. Here the condition becomes false and the compiler's control would not enter inside the body of the loop. And automatically compiler's control would exit the while loop. So we can always say all these 3 steps like initialization, condition and updation, while loop and for loop, they both are following these 3 steps. Initialization, first of all, the values are counter variable is initialized. Then the condition is checked. If the condition is true, then it will execute the rest of the statements which are inside the body of the loop. And if the condition is false, it will automatically come out of the loop. Then for the next then the value of counter variable, or you can say the value of I would be updated. And if again, it will again check the condition. If the condition is true, then the statements were executed, and if the condition is false, then it will come out of the loop. If we say we will not include this statement, if I plus plus is not included in while loop, then automatically every time, see, this is how the syntax works. Every time the condition is checked, statements were executed, and every time the condition is checked, statements were executed. So this is a going through operation. This is how it will work. So we have to update the counter variable, and we have to put such a condition which has at least at some point it will exit. If we input one such condition, the condition which will never become false, then it will lead to infinite loop and it will create an error. So why we call both of these loops as entry control, because prior to entering the body of the loop, it is actually checking the condition. Now let us move to another loop. This is the do while loop. So if we talk about do while loop, so this is how the syntax of initialization, I equals to 1, do statements, let us say printf, it is printing something, let us say hello world, I plus plus, and while I is less than equals to 10. So first of all, the initialization step, the way it was executed, and so this loop also, so do while loop is also having the 4 steps: initialization, condition, statements, and then updation. So this also has initialization, but in the very first step, after initializing the values, it is not checking the conditions. Instead, it is first of all executing all these statements. It is at the very first step in do while loop. At the very first step it is entering inside the loop. At the very first step. So we also known as an exit control loop. This is the pre-checking, this is the post-checking. After entering the loop, it is checking the condition. So first of all, the printf HW is printed. Then the counter variable I, after 1 it becomes 2, and then the condition is checked. So we can say the do while loop, in do while loop, the loop is executed at least once. So this is the syntax of for loop. So basically for loop, it is a repetition control structure, and it allows us to write a loop that is executed a specific number of times. This loop enables us to perform n number of steps together in one line, obviously in one line. So all these 3 steps, initialization, condition and increment or decrement, these all come under one line. So this is the syntax. Always remember, do not get confused with this thing. This syntax does not have semicolon. Basically, the freshers or the new learners, they usually put a semicolon, and it creates an error. If this, so the steps are executed, first of all the initialization, then it will check the condition. If the condition is true, the statements were executed, and after executing all these statements, the values would be updated, or we can say the counter variable is updated. After updating, if again the condition becomes true, then the statements were executed. So basically this is how it will go. Condition, statement, updation, condition, statement, updation, condition, statement, updation. If at some point the condition becomes false, then it will automatically come out of the loop. So this is how it is being executed. So these 3 steps we have: initialization, condition and increment, decrement. If we talk about initialization, so there is some value is being initialized. So initial value of the for loop is performed only once, like I equals to 1. And in condition, it is basically a Boolean expression. It checks and compares a counter variable to any fixed value after each iteration, and it stops the for loop when the condition becomes false. Like there are various conditions, like I is less than equals to 10 or less than equals to 20. See, always remember this Boolean. This is basically a Boolean expression. Why we call it as a Boolean expression? Because if the condition is true, if this condition is true, then it returns any non-zero value, and if the condition is false, then it returns 0. So for 0, the compiler know that the condition is false, and for any non-zero value, the compiler knows that the condition is true. So always remember, 0 is for false, and any non-zero value apart from 0, any non-zero value, it means the compiler is true. So this 0 and non-zero values, they are returned by any Boolean expression, and Boolean expression includes all the relational operators. Like we use all the relational operators for comparing less than, greater than, less than equals to, greater than equals to, not equals to. So all these condition, all these expressions, they return some Boolean value, right? 0 or 1. Yes, after that the third step says incrementation and decrementation. Obviously the counter variable is supposed to be updated. If we do not use increment or decrement, if we do not include this statement, increment or decrement, then the loop will endlessly continue. How it will continue? Let us just check. See, if we have this statement for I equals to 1, I less than equals to 10, and we have not entered any updation. And what we are writing? We are writing printf hi. So if we see, if we check how it is executing step by step, our first step is this. So counter variable I would become 1, right? So next step is this, condition would be checked. Is 1 less than equals to 10? Compiler says yes, this is true. Then enter inside the for loop, the body of the, it will print hi. Hi would be printed. It will not get any updation here because we have not input any value, we have not entered any value. Then again it will check, is I less than equals to 10? It will fetch the value from the memory block of the I variable, and 1 is 1 less than equals to 10, printf hi. Again it will check the value 1 less than equals to 10, printf hi. So obviously the value of I is not updated. If the value of I is not updated, it will every time the condition becomes true, every time the condition becomes true, and every time the hi and hi it would be printed. So hi would be printed around infinite number of times, and it will create an error. So to avoid these types of conflicts, to avoid these types of faults, to avoid these types of problems, the value would definitely should be updated. So At first iteration, I equals to 1 is checked, and at the next iteration 2 less than equals to 10, then 3 less than equals to 10, till 10 less than equals to 10, the condition would become true. The moment the value of I becomes 11 and 11 less than equals to 10, the condition will become false and it will come out of the loop. So the reason why we apply condition is to at some point we will come out of the loop. Right? It would definitely the loop should not be created in such a way that it will revolve inside the loop. So these are the 3 steps and which are mandatory to include in loops. This is the flow diagram. This is a data flow diagram, and here we have to start the flow chart. Initialization, let us say I equals to 1. Here the test condition, it includes I is less than equals to 10. Let us say the block of statements is we want to print f hello, and the update expression like I plus plus. Right? How it will execute? Let us see. Yes, we'll say I equals to 1. If I is less than equals to 10, print f. I'm writing this in short, printf. Assume it as printf, proper syntax, and this is I plus plus. So let us just move step by step. First of all, I would become 1. I is 1. Condition would be checked. If 1 is less than equals to 10, condition is true. If the statement is true, block of statement printf hello. The hello would be printed. Then I would become 2. Now again in the next step I would become 2. If the I become 2, then the control is moving towards the test condition. Then again it will check is 2 less than equals to 10, condition is true, then the hello would be printed. Again the I plus plus, I would updation is there, I would become true, and 3 is less than equals to 10, condition is true, hello is printed. And similarly I equals to 4, 5, 6. The moment I will become 9, condition is checked, 9 is less than equals to 10, condition is true, hello was printed 9th time, and I plus plus I would become 10. Then again 10 is less than equals to 10, condition compiler says the condition is true, and it would print 10th time the hello, and I would become 11. After updating the expression, I would become 11, then the control moves to the test condition. Again check if 11 is less than equals to 10, compiler says 11 is not less than equals to 10, and compiler is returns the value false. After false, it comes out of the loop and the stop. So here this is the basically flow diagram of for loop. This is example. We have already discussed this example. Initially the value was 0, and here if we do not include this, then also the program will execute. If I equals to 1, for the very first time, this is the I equals to 1, I equals to 2, and this is the I equals to 10. The 10 times the hello world is printed. This is a new line, escape sequence, new line, or we also call it as escape sequence. There are various escape sequences. There are various escape sequences like tab, / r, and new line. So after the for loop, there is a while loop. While loop is basically the most straightforward looping structure, and while studying for loop, we have seen that the number of iterations is known beforehand, like I is less than equals to 10. We know that the for loop would be executed 10 times. Obviously, the same problem should be evaluated in while loop as well. So basically, we can say the number of times a loop body is needed to be executed is known to us during for loop. And when we talk about while loop, in such situations, we do not know the exact number of iterations of the loop beforehand, and the loop execution is terminated on the basis of test condition. So basically almost all type of problems can be evaluated using for loop and while loop. But what type of, it depends on the problem and what type of solution we want to apply. Let us say in for loop, the various examples are, if we are required to print the table, then we can use a for loop. But if we need to find the sum of digits of a number, then while loop should be preferred. Because here we know that the table should be printed around 10 number of times. 2 cross 1 equals to 2. till 10. So we know the limit, but when we need to find the sum of digits of a number, we do not know what if the number is 12, the output should be 3. If the number is 1 2 3 4, the output should be 4 plus 3 7 8 9 10. So in this type of problem, the loop should be executed 3 times, 2 times, and in this problem, the loop should be executed around. The iterations were there were basically 4 times of iterations. So this is how the loop would be executed. So we can say in for loop, what we know this beforehand, how many number of times the loop would be executed. And in while loop, we do not know this prior, that how many number of times the loop would be executed. So for such problems, like to check whether a number is Armstrong or not, the while loop would be preferred. To check whether a number is prime number or not, the while loop would be preferred. To check if to print the table, to print the patterns, the for loop were known. Because for printing the pattern, for printing the table, we know how many number of lines should be printed. Like suppose we need to print this pattern, we know how many number of rows and columns are supposed to be printed. So for such kind of problems, for loop is used. So basically, in overall, we know this in prior. For such problems in which we know the prior condition, the prior limit, then we should use for loop, and this is basically the feasible solution. And for such problems like to find the reverse of a number, to find the sum of the digits, the while loop should be used, because in while loop if we do not know the actual number of iterations, so for such problems we should use while loop. So the syntax of while loop is this: initialization, this is the expression, here the statements, and the increment decrement. So first of all, the first step is this is the condition. Second step, if the condition becomes true, the statements were executed, and then the updation. Again, if the condition becomes true, then these 2 3 4 these steps would keep on executing until the condition is false. So we can say in while loop, if the condition is not true, then the body of the loop will not be executed, not even once. If initially the condition is false, then definitely, suppose if we have I equals to 10, and the expression in condition if I is greater than equals to 5, obviously the condition becomes false, because 10 is greater than equals to 5. This condition is false, and the compiler's control would not enter inside the loop. So at the very first point before, this is why we call it as pre-checking and entry control loop. So it would not enter inside the loop if the condition is not true. This is the flow chart. Test condition, it executes the body, and here the updation, increment, decrement, until the condition becomes false. If the condition is false, the while loop would end eventually. This is the example. The same example, we have to print number from 1 to 10. Let us say and num is equals to 1. Initially, the value of num variable is 1. If 1 is less than equals to 10, the condition becomes true. Then it will print the value of num as an integer 1. Then value of num will become plus plus, means it becomes false. Then it again check the condition if 2 is less than equals to 10, and eventually it would print the values from 1 to 10. The moment the value of num becomes 11, it will eventually come out of the loop. Do while loop. In do while loops also the loop execution is terminated on the basis of test condition. The main difference between do while loop and while loop is, in do while loop the condition is tested at the end of the loop body. So we can say the initial expression do, and then the statements were executed, the updated expression, and here the while statement. Always remember, in for loop and in while loop we were not using semicolon, and in do while we use semicolon. So semicolon in the end of the loop is mandatory in do while. This is how the syntax is being executed. So the body of do while loop, it is actually executed once. We have already discussed this, and only then the test expression is evaluated. Suppose if we have this expression I equals to 10, do, we need to print something, printf %t and I, and then I plus plus, while I is less than equals to 5. See, we have entered I is less than equals to 5, 10 is less than equals to 5, condition is false, we all know this. But even if the condition is false, it will enter inside the loop at least for once. So I equals to 10, initially it will initialize the value of I to 10. it will evaluate these statements, it will print I, 10 it would print, then the value of I would become 11, and then it will check. If 11 is less than equals to 5, condition is false. Condition was false initially as well, but the syntax of do while says it will enter inside the loop at least for once. So if the test expression is true, the body of the loop is executed again, and if the test expression is false, then the compiler's control would come out of the do while loop immediately. So this is a flow chart of the loop. First of all, while loop start, it executes the loop body, and then it will check the test condition. Right? For the very next time, for the next iteration. So for I equals to 1, so at the first iteration, it would execute the loop body anyhow. And for the next iterations, it will keep on checking the condition. If the condition is met, if the condition is true, then in the next iteration, the loop body would be executed. As per this is example. This is how the do while loop. So first of all, the num is equals to 1, then it would execute these statements. %d, the value in this, it would print 2 into num, means initially the num is equals to 1, 2 into 1 is equals to 1, and this is how do while loop would be executed. So this is the reason why we call is that exit control loop or the post checking loop, because it is checking the condition at the end of the loop. I hope this is clear to everyone. So this is all for today. We have discussed while loop, for loop, and do while loop, all the 3 types of loop, why we used loops, what were the need to use loops, and we'll continue further. Thank you so much.